Welcome to the pod-key summary of Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest matters for a few different reasons at once. It helped teach a huge audience how to play RPGs in the first place. It set a lot of the genre's vocabulary, and in Japan it grew into something much bigger than a game series. At the same time, its whole identity comes from staying recognizable. That's been a strength, a criticism, and now, with Dragon Quest XII looming as a possible turning point, it's also the big question hanging over the franchise. One of the smartest things Yuji Horii did was treat Dragon Quest like a gateway, not a test. He pulled from Ultima's world map and Wizardry's battle and stat screens. But the real goal was simpler than that sounds. Players should understand what to do without needing a manual or a tutorial to hold their hand. That approach is all over the series. If you just want to move through the story and handle the basic battles, you can. If you want more, the games have plenty of room for it through classes, exploration, monster recruitment, harder dungeons, and optional challenges. So the barrier to entry is low, but the floor isn't the ceiling. That balance is a big part of why the series clicked with so many people. Horii also cared about very small things that don't sound dramatic until you've played a clunky game, and instantly felt the difference. He focused on menu speed, on door-opening animations, on whether basic interactions felt smooth enough that you stopped noticing them. His idea was that controls should become almost unconscious. You shouldn't be constantly thinking about the interface when you're trying to adventure. That's such a quiet design choice, but it's one of those reasons some games feel welcoming, and others feel like they're asking you to fill out paperwork before you can have fun. Dragon Quest didn't just become popular, it helped lock in a bunch of conventions that went on to define Japanese console RPGs. Turn-based menu combat, experience-based leveling, random encounters, party progression, recurring monsters, class systems, all of that became familiar, partly because Dragon Quest made it familiar. And the influence gets more specific. The deeper you look, Dragon Quest III's class-changing system fed into later RPG design, especially Final Fantasy. Dragon Quest IV had programmable NPC tactics, which feels like a clear early ancestor to systems like Final Fantasy XII's Gambits. Dragon Quest V lets you recruit and train monsters, which helped inspire later monster-collecting games, including Pokemon and Digimon. That same game also did something unusual for an RPG by making the hero's future wife, and even pregnancy, central to the story. Family formation became part of the emotional core, instead of just background flavor. A lot of the conversation around Dragon Quest comes down to one thing. It never really abandoned its classic roots. For fans, that's the point. The straightforward structure, the familiar rhythms, the nostalgic feel, that's the appeal. For critics, those same qualities can read as simplistic graphics, limited character development, straightforward stories, grinding, and some pretty punishing battles. Horii's philosophy wasn't to remove tension. He wanted resource management to matter, random encounters to create pressure, and dungeons to feel dangerous. If your party dies, you go back to the last save point and lose half your gold. That penalty gives the adventure weight, even if it also gives players a reason to stare at the screen in silence for a second. The series usually balances a mostly linear story with early chances to explore more openly, and it deliberately spaces rewards closely at the start, so new players don't feel lost too quickly. In Japan, Dragon Quest became more than a hit. It became a cultural institution. The slime mascot is so widely recognized that the franchise has been described as a common conversational reference, even as Japan's national game. Dragon Quest III is the legendary example. It sold 1.1 million cartridges on its first day in 1988 and 3 million within a week. That release was so big it reportedly caused school truancy, and it helped fuel the long-running urban myth that Japan passed a law limiting game sales to weekends. No such law was actually enacted, but the fact that people found the story believable tells you a lot. The series also spilled into physical spaces and public culture. There was Luida's Bar in Tokyo, a themed medieval pub built around game items and monsters. Its music has shown up in annual concerts, ballet adaptations, and even the opening ceremony of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Very few game series get folded into cultural life at that level. Outside Japan, the story was much shakier for a long time. Part of that was branding. The first North American releases had to use the name Dragon Warrior because of a trademark conflict with an unrelated tabletop RPG. Square Enix didn't register Dragon Quest for US use until 2002. Part of it was timing and competition. In North America, Dragon Quest was largely overshadowed by Final Fantasy. Nintendo reportedly had to give away copies of the early Dragon Warrior games, and Dragon Quest V and VI skipped initial North American release after Enix shut down its regional branch. The real breakthrough came much later. Dragon Quest VIII, released in the West in 2005, finally used the Dragon Quest name in North America, and helped establish the franchise more clearly overseas. Then Dragon Quest IX pushed further, selling more than 1 million copies outside Japan. It didn't erase the gap between Japan and the rest of the world, but it did prove the series could travel. Dragon Quest is also unusually good at turning side ideas into whole new series. Torneco's shopkeeping and dungeon-crawling spin-offs launched the Mystery Dungeon line, which eventually became a major franchise in its own right and spread well beyond Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest monsters expanded the monster collecting side of the brand, and then you get this whole parade of reinterpretations. Builders, Heroes, Slime, Mori, Itadaki Street, Theatrhythm, Dragon Quest Walk, even arcade card games. Construction, action, strategy, rhythm, augmented reality, physical competition. The series has gone a lot of places without losing its identity. And that expansion isn't only in games, manga, novels, anime, films, live-action TV, restaurants, theme park VR, concerts, ballet. It really functions like a transmedia universe. A huge reason Dragon Quest has stayed so consistent is the creative partnership at its center. Yuji Horii shaped the scenarios and overall design. Akira Toriyama created the characters and monsters, and Koichi Sugiyama supplied the music. That trio made the series instantly identifiable across different developers, platforms, and generations. Toriyama's slime is the perfect example. Mechanically, it's just a simple enemy, but artistically it became one of the most iconic mascots in games. Horii specifically pointed to the imagination it took to turn a plain pool of slime into a character people genuinely love. That little blue shape carries a surprising amount of the series' soul. Now the interesting part is, what happens next? Dragon Quest XII was presented as a transition point, especially after the deaths of Toriyama and Sugiyama. It was originally announced with a darker tone, more consequential choices, and a reworked take on turn-based combat. But development was reportedly restarted from scratch under the new title, Beyond Dreams. So the next game carries a lot of weight. Dragon Quest has spent decades proving that continuity can be powerful, and now it may have to show how change fits into that tradition without losing itself. That's the story with Dragon Quest, a series built on clarity, routine, and charm that somehow turned those qualities into a cultural force. It taught people how to play RPGs, influenced generations of games, and kept finding new forms without completely letting go of its old shape. For a franchise with so many slimes and church save points, that's a pretty remarkable legacy. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.